They said the flag above the carrier still caught morning light, but the laughter cut sharper than wind off the bay. The air boss scoffed at the veteran's faded lanyard, said it looked retired like the man wearing it. Then the old tag swung once in the glare, its lettering clear enough to stop a dozen voices, cold, Viper 1. Quietly, the deck remembered who taught its silence. Quiet men leave echoes, too. The morning air over the USS Orion museum carrier carried the sharp scent of salt and paint. Flags clacked against their poles while visitors gathered along the railing for the Veterans Day demonstration. The flight deck loudspeaker crackled a tired old speaker that still worked harder than it should. Air Boss Beckett stepped up to the mic, his sunglasses reflecting the crowd. "All right, folks, today we're joined by some of our legacy crew." He gestured toward a small line of retirees in faded coveralls. They helped keep these birds flying back when slide rules were high-tech. Laughter rippled through the audience. Then he spotted Jack Hollis, a gray-haired mechanic, whose lanyard hung low on his chest. The nylon frayed, the metal tag dulled to pewter. Beckett squinted and smirked. "Guess relics come with accessories," he said. Another laugh. A few phones lifted for pictures. Jack didn't answer. He simply pressed one hand over the lanyard thumb, tracing the worn engraving, the way a man checks his own pulse. The motion was small, deliberate. He'd polished jet canopies once that gleamed brighter than any of these smiles. Eli Nguyen, 24, and still learning to salute without thinking twice, stood near the edge of the deck. He'd been assigned to shadow the veterans during orientation week, mostly to keep them from tripping over safety lines. The joke didn't sit well with him now. The crowd drifted toward the next display. Beckett's voice followed them, booming over the speaker, "Regulations change, gentlemen. Outdated gear should be retired." That line landed like grit in the wind, first guy spark soft, but sharp. Eli winced. Jack adjusted the cap on his head, then spoke quietly, almost to himself. "Regulations keep you safe. Habit keeps you alive." Eli caught it. "Sir." "Nothing," Jack said. "Just wind talking." A gull shrieked above its wings, flashing white in the sunlight. For a moment, everything on deck paused, the flags, the chatter, even Beckett's running commentary. That silence was the kind of pause Jack trusted, the kind born from engines cooling after a mission, not applause. He walked toward the edge rail boots, echoing against metal. Beneath him, the harbor shimmered. The water looked like aluminum under the morning glare. Eli followed. "They didn't mean anything by it," he said. "Sure they did," Jack replied, a dry chuckle hidden behind his breath. "They meant it's not regulation." Beckett's voice returned lighter now. "All right, folks. Let's show how modern deck crews handle things. No more grease-stained lanyards out here." The microphone squealed, cutting his own punchline short. Some veterans laughed under their breath. Jack didn't. He lifted his gaze toward the sky where contrails crossed like thin white scars. He whispered, "Dill flying." Then he turned away, letting the lanyard slip back beneath his collar. Silent beat. Wind brushed across the deck, lifting a paper flag into the air. Jack watched it spiral down beside his boot. The sound of the harbor came through the slow percussion of rope against metal. He bent, picked up the flag, and tucked it near a coil of line. No one noticed, except Eli. "Mr. Hollis, just keeping the deck clean, kid." Eli smiled. "Old habits." Jack nodded. "Not regulation," he said, voice steady, almost amused. "But it works." The gulls answered for him, a ragged harmony against the hum of the sea. By late morning, the sun had turned the painted deck lanes into ribbons of color: red for fire crews, yellow for handlers, blue for plane captains. The lines looked like they'd been drawn yesterday, though most were older than the ensign giving the tour. Jack Hollis knelt beside a section where the paint was fading. He tapped it with a knuckle. You see this, Eli? Every stripe means something. Miss one and the sky punishes you. Eli crouched next to him. Sir, we use digital overlays now. Augmented guidance systems. Jack smiled faintly. Yeah, but when the system glitches, you still need eyes and instincts. He ran a finger along the yellow line, the tip of his lanyard brushing against the deck, its tag catching a shard of light before swinging back in the breeze. The sun had climbed high above the carrier by the time the maintenance crew gathered near the forward elevator. The USS Orion looked alive. Again, tourists cleared banners folded and every sailor in sight holding a clipboard or radio. Beckett stood at the center of the bustle, pointing at a laminated chart, like a man unveiling a miracle. All right, people, he called, this isn't your average tour. Headquarters wants footage for the Veterans Week broadcast. We'll run a live safety demonstration at 1400. Cameras on, smiles on. Let's remind the public this old deck can still dance. The young techs nodded, half excited, half confused. The plan sounded easy. The weather was perfect. Nothing could possibly go wrong. Jack Hollis listened from behind a line of tow bars, arms crossed. He'd seen the laminated sheet earlier, and something about the layout bothered him. The landing zone markers were shifted 6 feet closer to the forward fence, maybe for the camera's angle. It was small, but small mistakes were what chewed up aircraft in the old days. He walked toward Beckett, slowly, boots echoing against steel. Sir, he said, calm and even, that red marker's off alignment. If you follow that grid, you'll have overlap on the towpath. Beckett didn't look up from his chart. Relax, Hollis. We're not launching jets. It's a demonstration. Demonstrations follow the same rules as the real thing, Jack replied. If we're showing procedure, it should be correct. The air boss smirked. The camera doesn't know procedure. It knows symmetry. Jack took a breath. The sunlight caught the tag of his lanyard as it swung forward, a flicker of silver crossing Beckett's chart. The young officers nearby went quiet for a second, watching the exchange. Eli Nguyen stood a few steps behind, holding a paint roller and pretending to focus on his task. But he wasn't painting anymore. He was listening. Look, old man, Beckett said, finally lowering his voice. You've got your nostalgia, and that's fine. But out here today, we're selling confidence, not caution. The line stays where it is. Jack's jaw tightened, though his voice stayed low. Confidence doesn't mean ignorance, sir. For a heartbeat, nobody spoke. The metallic hum of the deck filled the gap. Then Beckett turned away, waving his clipboard at the crew. Positions for rehearsal. Let's move. The tension hung heavy in the air like static before a storm. Eli waited until Beckett was out of earshot. You were right about the marker, weren't you? Jack nodded once. Maybe he's right about the cameras. But when you forget why the lines were drawn, the deck forgets too. Eli looked at him, the same kind of respect forming that no rulebook could teach. Sir, I'd trust your lines more than his symmetry. Jack's face softened. Don't call me sir. Just Jack. Yes, Jack. That'll do. They both smiled, the briefest thaw in the morning heat. The lanyard shifted again, catching sunlight like it agreed. The rehearsal began. Crew members moved into formation, pushing mock equipment, signaling imaginary aircraft. Beckett paced near the edge, barking orders into a radio. Keep it tight, people. Remember, it's about precision, not hesitation. A seagull swooped low, startled by the sudden flurry of movement. The deck rang with shouted commands, clattering tools, the metallic click of wheel chocks. Jack watched hands resting on the railing. Every motion reminded him of a rhythm once sacred, now performed for an audience that didn't understand the tune. He noticed a junior tech misreading a signal almost crossing into the active path. Jack's voice cut through the noise, steady, not loud. "Stop where you are. Look at the red." The kid froze inches from the tow lane. Beckett scowled from across the deck, but said nothing. Eli whispered, "You just saved his hide." Jack shook his head. "I just reminded him of the color code." The silent beat came unexpectedly. The warning lights above the hangar flickered on red circles pulsing against steel walls. The deck's hum dropped into an uneasy quiet. Even Beckett looked up. A loudspeaker crackled. Somewhere below deck, a crewman had tripped a power relay. The air shifted brittle with expectation. Then the horn blared. Sound rolled across the deck like a wave. Everyone froze eyes on the red lights flashing in rhythm. Jack's hand tightened around his lanyard. Eli's breath caught. In that moment, training returned. Not the PR kind, the real one, the one that lived in muscle memory and quiet resolve. Jack turned to Eli. "Now you'll see why we paint straight lines." A small group of visitors walked by, phones raised. One of them, a young tech contractor in slim sunglasses, called out with a grin. "You folks cling to lanyards. We've got apps for that." The others laughed light and careless. Eli's shoulders stiffened. Jack only looked up, steady as a tide mark. "Apps crash," he said softly. "Discipline doesn't." The man blinked, unsure if he'd been corrected or blessed. Then he turned away. Guy Seed logged generational tease. Soft spark, not wound. Eli watched the crowd disappear. "Doesn't it bother you, sir, when they talk like that?" Jack shrugged. "If you start defending every memory, you stop making new ones." He stood pointing to a cluster of colored discs embedded in the deck. "These tell you where to stop a tow tractor. Every mark has its story. Once I slipped between red and yellow." Eli grinned. "What happened?" "Lost a boot and half my pride." Jack's eyes glimmered, a humor line breaking through the morning heat. "These marks keep you alive and clean your shoes if you trip." Eli laughed, the sound bouncing against the hangar wall. "I'll remember that." "You better. It's not regulation advice, but it's survived longer than some manuals." The rhythm of the deck returned, metal tapping waves below the soft hum of flags overhead. A silent beat settled between them. The sound of rope slapping a stanchion kept time like an old metronome. Jack traced another line, this one white and nearly gone. That used to mean emergency tow path. Funny thing, nobody paints over it. Like they're waiting for someone to need it again. Eli squinted. "Do you ever repaint them?" "Not me," Jack said. "I just show people how to read what's left." The lanyard shifted again, glinting, swinging as if answering for him. "Prop partial stage confirmed." Then came a voice from the far side of the deck, Beckett, again leaning on the rail with a clipboard. "Hollis, you teaching classes now or polishing museum floors?" Jack didn't look up. "Doing both, sir. Keeps the color from fading." Beckett snorted. "You keep polishing ghosts, we'll have to charge admission." "That's fine," Jack replied, still calm. "Ghosts pay better attention." Beckett turned away, muttering something lost to the wind. Eli watched, eyes wide. "You're not afraid to talk back, huh?" Jack smiled. "I'm not talking back. I'm keeping the lines straight." The gulls wheeled overhead again, their cries mixing with the rhythm of waves and steel. Eli knelt beside the yellow line, dragging one finger along it the way Jack had. "Feels like history," he said. "It is," Jack replied. "Just not the kind they teach in training videos." The wind lifted his lanyard once more. The tag flashed like a tiny medal before it fell back against his chest, steady as his voice. The first warning was a sound that didn't befit on a metallic cough from the starboard catwalk, quick and ugly. The crew froze. Beckett spun around, waving at the cameraman to keep rolling. "Stay with me, it's just a dry run," he barked. But another noise followed, louder this time, a grinding protest from the tow winch. The deck shuddered beneath them. A tow bar slipped from its latch and rolled halfway across the safety zone, stopping exactly where Jack had said it would. Jack moved before anyone else. "Shut it down," he said. Beckett raised his clipboard like a shield. "No, we're live in 5. "Shut it down, Jack," repeated his voice, low, steady, the kind that made even the seagulls hush. Eli stared at him, heart-hammering. Beckett's radio squawked with confused chatter. "Control, we have a snag in section Charlie," someone reported. Jack stepped past the painted lines, each stride falling into the rhythm of a man who had done this too many times to think. The lanyard on his chest swung forward, the silver tag catching sunlight for the first time in full. The letters read, Viper 1. Beckett's words faltered. Where'd you get that call sign?" Jack didn't answer. His hand lifted in a silent gesture, 2 fingers forward, the old deck command to clear. Eli understood instinctively and began waving the same pattern. The nearby handlers moved, obeying something deeper than the chain of command. In 30 seconds, the chaos turned into order. Tow bars, locked cables aligned, every crewman frozen in the right place. The loudspeaker crackled, then went dead. A gust swept across the deck, rattling a flag, and then nothing. The wind stopped, like the ocean itself was listening. The ship's hum fell quiet. You could hear the tick of a loose bolt and someone's breath catching in their throat. The deck went silent. Beckett lowered his radio. "What are you doing?" "Hollis, showing them how procedure sounds when it's done right," Jack replied. His voice carried easily even without the mic. "You wanted symmetry. This is balance." The silence deepened. No clapping, no voices. Just the faint groan of steel adjusting to stillness. Eli could feel the weight of it, a ceremony disguised as an accident. Beckett tried to recover, snapping, "You're out of line." Jack looked at him. "No, sir. I'm on the line. The one you moved." The words landed harder than any shout. Beckett's face tightened. Protocol itself seemed to close in around him, invisible and heavy. He was slammed by procedure, not anger. SM lock plus evidence confirmed pressure, not violence. A single gull cried, breaking the spell. Someone near the camera whispered, "Viper 1. That was his unit back in 91. Jack didn't respond. He simply adjusted his lanyard, the tag resting flat against his chest. The breeze returned slowly, carrying away the tension. Beckett lowered his eyes. "You saved my broadcast." Jack gave a faint smile. "Didn't mean to. Just saved the deck." Eli exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath the whole time. Around them, the crew began to move again, quietly, respectfully, as if leaving church. For a brief moment, the sunlight hit the lanyard again. Its reflection danced across the steel landing on the old white line no one ever repainted. Jack looked down at it, then toward Eli. "That's what the silence means, kid. Not failure, just respect." Eli nodded. "Yes, sir. I mean Jack." The engines below resumed their distant hum, softer now, almost human. The ship breathed again. The harbor cafe sat just beyond the pier, its windows open to the smell of diesel and salt. Noon light cut through the blinds, landing on old photos of ships and crews that had long since gone quiet. The veterans' table was full today, 4 men, 1 woman, and 2 cups for those who couldn't make it anymore. At the center sat Jack Hollis, his lanyard coiled beside his coffee mug. Steam rose in lazy curls, catching sunlight the same way his tag had caught it on deck. The bell above the door jingled. Marge Alvarez, owner and former Navy radio tech, waved from behind the counter. "Morning, Jack," the usual. He smiled. "You read minds, Marge." She poured the coffee, added a refill to another cup without asking, and nodded toward the flag on the shelf, a small folded triangle in glass. "You folks made the news again." "Good or bad?" one of the old men asked. "Good," Marge said. "Viral good." Somebody uploaded the video from the carrier. They titled it, "Viper 1 Makes the Deck Go Silent." Phones came out immediately. Fingers swiped, screens glowed. A few seconds later, the sound of the horn played through tinny speakers, followed by the hush of the deck, and the moment Jack lifted his hand. No music. No narration. Just the silence. The table fell quiet the same way the ship had. Even the coffee machine paused between cycles. Jack looked away from the screen toward the pier. "Funny how the best sound is the one that's missing," he said. Beckett appeared at the counter, not in uniform now, just a jacket, and that same unshakable posture of command, softer around the edges. He didn't interrupt. He just set a few bills near the register and nodded toward Marge. "Coffee for the old crew," he said. Marge raised an eyebrow. "You joining them maybe next round?" Jack turned, met his eyes for the first time since the incident. Beckett hesitated, then approached the table. "You run a good deck," he said. Jack's answer was mild. "We ran it together. That was all." Beckett nodded once, left without touching his drink. A long, silent beat stretched out after the bell above the door stopped ringing. Only the hiss of the coffee machine and the soft clang of a spoon on porcelain filled the gap. Marge leaned over Jack's shoulder to look at the video again. "You know what people are saying in the comments?" He shook his head. "They're saying it felt like watching discipline breathe." Jack chuckled quietly. "Discipline and caffeine keeps the Navy running." Marge laughed, then wiped her hands on her apron. "Guess the air boss found his mute button." The table broke into laughter, low and warm. The kind that didn't mock anyone, just evened the air. A breeze came through the door, fluttering the little flag on the shelf. One of the older vets reached into his wallet, slid a 10 beneath the salt shaker. "For the refill," he said. "And the memories." Marge smiled. "Tips go to the scholarship fund, like always." Eli entered, then still in training blues, unsure if he should sit. Jack motioned to the empty chair. "Pull up a seat, kid." "You earned it." Eli nodded, eyes falling on the lanyard beside the mug. "They're still talking about you, sir." Jack shook his head. "No. They're talking about the deck." Outside the harbor, gulls answered with their own chatter. The sunlight warmed the coffee cups until the steam looked almost golden. The lanyard stayed still. It didn't need to shine anymore. The museum's hangar smelled faintly of oil and salt, even though the carrier had not moved in decades. Morning light filtered through the high windows, cutting neat squares across the polished floor. Visitors drifted in slow circles around the exhibits. Photographs, helmets, nameplates, each one labeled with a short paragraph that barely captured the weight of a lifetime. At the far end of the deck sat a new display, a glass case lined with brass and soft backlight. Inside lay a frayed lanyard, the tag gleaming clean under the spotlight. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Viper 1 made the deck go silent." Eli Nguyen stood beside the case, uniform, crisp voice, steady. This belonged to Chief Mechanic Jack Hollis, he told the group of tourists. most old enough to remember the days of carrier drills. He served 23 years, training 3 generations of flight crews. What you see here isn't just a tag, it's a signal that discipline can outlast time. The crowd listened quietly. Cameras stayed low. Even the children seemed to sense the moment. Jack watched from the back of the group, hands in his jacket pockets. His hair had gone a little whiter since that PR drill, and he'd traded the old lanyard for a new one, simple blue nylon with a clean tag. The kind issued to docents, not deckhands. Eli continued his rhythm, sure but soft. Some of you might have seen the clip online. The one where the deck went quiet mid-show. That silence wasn't fear. It was respect. He paused, eyes finding Jack in the crowd. Mr. Hollis taught me that. A few heads turned. Jack pretended to study the display map on the wall. He didn't need the attention. The light on the glass was enough. After the tour ended, Eli lingered by the case, wiping a faint fingerprint from the brass frame. I never thanked you properly, he said when Jack approached. You just did, Jack replied. They still talk about that day, Eli said. Every year the Academy uses the video in orientation. The moment the deck went quiet, it's part of the safety code now. Jack smiled, faint and genuine. Guess the silence finally found its place. Eli nodded. People say it gives them chills. Jack looked at the glass again, at the tag resting under the light. It wasn't about chills, he said. It was about listening before reacting. Respect doesn't need volume. The words hung there, simple and final, the replay trigger the moment was built for. The afternoon sun shifted, laying gold over the brass plaque. A small girl tugged her father's sleeve nearby. Daddy, why is everyone so quiet here? Her father whispered. Because this place remembers people who kept others safe. Jack smiled at that. He adjusted his new lanyard, the nylon still stiff from the gift shop, then looked back at Eli. Keep teaching the lines, kid. Eli saluted lightly. Always. Outside the harbor, wind moved the flags along the pier. Somewhere a cafe bell rang, the same warm tone as before. Jack took one last glance through the glass, nodded once, and walked toward the sunlight spilling through the open hatch. If this story moved you, share it forward. The museum was closing for the evening, the glass case glowing softly under the last shaft of daylight. Still, the lanyard inside caught that light just right. Its brass tag reading Viper 1 made the deck go silent, surrounded by the hum of old stories and the hush of visitors who somehow lowered their voices without being told. Eli adjusted the velvet rope, and behind him, Jack lingered near the doorway, a hand resting over the new lanyard around his neck. The air smelled faintly of salt and polish. Somewhere a ship's bell rang once, then quieted. Respect doesn't need volume, it just needs someone willing to remember. The proof gleamed in brass and glass, simple as a handshake after a long duty. And as the doors closed, the reflection of that tag trembled in the window like a small, steady star.